All right, I'm coming to you live right here on Old Spanish Trail and McGregor, which is now Martin Luther King and Old Spanish Trail. And in the back, we have Martin Luther King. But before Martin Luther King, let me go back to some history here. First of all, I'd say thank y'all, each and every one of you, for all the support that you've given me on doing these historical videos. And without you, I wouldn't be doing what I'm doing. And first of all, people say, why are you doing what you're doing? Because I'm blessed. I feel like I was called upon to do this. And I will explain as I go, and it makes a lot of sense because it was right here is where I got my beginning of my career after I left Jack Yates. In 1963, Martin Luther King had a dream. But before Martin Luther King had a dream, 40 years before, Henry Frederick McGregor had a dream. And what Mr. McGregor's dream was to be able to build a park that would be able to be on the other end of Brays Bayou. He had seen what George Herman did and donated so many acres over there by Herman Park. On one side of the bayou, he wanted to give another side of the bayou, which is Brays Bayou, when Mr. Henry Frederick McGregor, when he had a mind in putting this park together, it wasn't about a racist thing. It's not about a color thing. It's just in 1956 when whites moved over there in South Park. And as you can see, McGregor is pretty close to 3rd Ward. But people in 3rd Ward didn't have to worry about coming here because they went to Emancipation Park. And the rest of the 3rd Ward went to the YMCA. So they had no really reason to come over here to McGregor Park. So the whites in South Park, they decided to put a zoning so that it keeps black out of here until the Civil Rights Bill that was passed in 1964. So this park got integrated in 65. But before then, this was South Park Boulevard, and this was one of the first white subdivision that they had out here on the south side. And we will go down South Park Boulevard, which is now Martin Luther King. And it just show you how good God is. Because when Martin Luther King got assassinated in April of 1968, I was a manager at a 7-Eleven on South Park Boulevard in Belford. And we had 7 7-Elevens. Now, I will go and start showing you how South Park was. South Park was a city by itself. All right, we're on Martin Luther King Boulevard. As you can see over there is the University of Houston. That's the future home of the College of Medicine at University of Houston. They own all this property back here. So we'll see how that come up in the future. But that's the future home of the University of Houston College of Medicine. As we go down Martin Luther King Boulevard, that once was South Park Boulevard. And we will go right into South Park, which was built in 1956. And it was built for whites only. And as we go up here and McGregor Park, we're gonna pass McGregor Park, and as we go right up here to Old Spanish Trail, and we remember Old Spanish Trail because this is the one that ties into Harrisburg, Texas. But we're gonna show you where blacks started moving out here in South Park in 1967 because the Civil Rights Bill was passed in 1964, and it was against the law to discriminate against housing in 1965. And this is when blacks started moving out of 3rd Ward into South Park. And it was called South Park. It didn't get changed until 1977 when Fred Harpine, one of the best mayors that I ever seen in my era, he the one, along with, we had good leadership during them days. We had leadership like Mr. Zolliskell Sr., Nicky Leland, also John B. Coleman. We had ministers, Reverend C.L. Jackson, Reverend M.M. Malone, Reverend Clarence Jackson, along with Reverend Joey Nelson. We had leadership during that time. That's why so much was done in the 1970s. And as we go down South Park, we are now entering South Park. And South Park was a street before Martin Luther King Boulevard. And South Park had everything that they wanted in this white neighborhood. This was their second place of being part of Riv Oaks, that they can exclusive themselves away from blacks. This was middle-class white people lived in this area, which is South Park. And as we go down South Park, they had their own bowling alley here in South Park.
they had the elementary school that was already here in South Park. All of this was white only up until 1967. Really until 65 is when they started moving out here, but in 67, blacks was almost coming to predominate this area out here, and whites was beginning to move out. Right over there was the South Park bowling alley. And as we come up here down Martin Luther King, we'll be coming up towards the Palm Center, which was the first shopping center here in Houston, Texas, built in 1956. This was here before Gulf Gate. This was the first shopping center that we had here in Houston. And it was made only for these white people that stayed out here in South Park, because South Park development didn't come in until 1956 when they started building homes out here. But they had built the shopping center in 1955 before the homes started being developed out here in South Park. And right over there was the first shopping center, which was called South Park Palm Center. Okay, as we come up on Perry Street and South Park Boulevard was one of the first parts that blacks started moving out here in South Park in 1965. It was still predominantly white area. It stayed predominantly white area until the late 60s to 69, when blacks really start getting the majority out here in South Park. Now, up here in South Park and Yellowstone, because it's still going to be called South Park, even though it's Martin Luther King today, but we're going to call it South Park, which is the original name of it. And as we cross Yellowstone, we go over here. Over there was a place called the King Center Drive-In. The King Center Drive-In. They had double screens over there, something that we didn't have over at Chocolate Bayou Drive-In. And as we go down here, and it wasn't no 610 here, and the street was called South Park Boulevard. They didn't change the street until 1977. And one of our best mayors that we ever had in my era was Fred Harfine, along with him and Mickey Leland, Dr. Coleman, Zolly Skills, Reverend Moore, Reverend C.L. Jackson, Reverend Stanley Branch. All of those people helped convince Fred Harfine, and I'll say he was one of the best. And 610 was not here. And Fred Harfine was the first to hire a sergeant in the police department. Fred Harfine was one of the best mayors here in this city, along with Kathy Whitmire, because Kathy Whitmire was the first to hire a black police chief in Lee Brown, and that was in the 80s. But again, we had good leadership, something that we don't have today. We don't have a Mickey Leland. We don't have a Craig Washington. We don't have the Dr. John B. Coleman, Mr. McHannon. We don't have them type of people now. So that we don't have the leadership to be able to make these politicians be able to stand up and help us. So it is what it is. But as we go down Martin Luther King Boulevard, they had their own bank out here in South Park. It was called South Park Bank. That was on the corner of Van Fleet and South Park. But as we go here, and when I first came out here, coming out of Jack Yates, for being the first black to be hired at the 7-Eleven store, and 7-Eleven was like Kroger wheels. They wasn't in the black community. They had 7 stores out here, and one of their main stores was out here on South Park and St. Lo. That was one. Then they had another one on Persian Street over there behind Jones High School, and then we had another 7-Eleven on the corner of Belford and McCall Road, and then we had another 7-Eleven on the corner of Belford and South Park. That's the one I managed. And right up here on Van Fleet was the bank. South Park Bank was right there on that corner. And right over there, behind that thing over there, was a big, one of the first targets that they built, Kmart. When they built Kmart right out here. And as we go down and see blacks from 3rd Ward start moving in here in the 65, 66, 67. And then you had blacks that coming from Sunnyside. They start coming over here. Because remember, Sunnyside was not part of Houston, Texas until 1956, when Houston annexed Sunnyside. So therefore, Sunnyside was overcrowded, and they had to start moving out here to South Park. And they was buying homes out here because blacks was working during them days, and they was working for their families, and they was trying to have something. And right out here is when blacks from South Park, right, the blacks started coming to South Park right here on Belford. And right over there on that corner over there was the store I was a manager at when Martin Luther King got assassinated in April 1968. I was managing this 7-Eleven store that now is a Valero store. Now right over here was the Rice Food Market that they had over here. And Rice Food Market stores was just like Kroger stores. They was mainly in for a lot of white clientele. And they didn't build stores in the black neighborhood until the late 80s. And right out here, they also had a wine garden over there on Belford. So they had the places out here for the people to eat and shop at. But all this was exclusively white neighborhood in 1956 when this neighborhood opened up. It was for white only. Blacks didn't start coming into this neighborhood until right about 10 years later when blacks started moving in this neighborhood. And all of this was still part of South Park. And South Park went all the way down and it dead end at Selinsky. And they built, and right up here off of South Acres as we come to, it was also a 7-Eleven store. We had a total of 7 stores out here. And I say we because I was part of Randy Waller, our supervisor. He was the one who gave me the opportunity to come out here and work at these stores and also become a manager at 7-Eleven. And as we cross over this bridge, this is Sims Bayou, y'all. Sims Bayou ties into Brays Bayou. But Sims Bayou is one of the biggest bayous, one of the biggest bayous out here on the south side that ties into Brays Bayou. But now right up here is Airport and Martin Luther King. Cause see, Martin Luther King dead end at that time. It was still called South Park Village. I beg your pardon. It was called South Park Boulevard, and it dead end and at Selinsky. It came all the way out here to South Acres. It passed South Acres, and it was beginning to grow in 1965. But they had to start letting blacks come in here. But they had already built a new school out here for the white people, and it was called Sterling. And it was built in 1965. But blacks didn't start going to Sterling until around about 1968 and 69 when blacks started going to Sterling. Blacks was going to Jones before they was going to Sterling. And right out here was part of South Park Boulevard that we're going down, and South Park Boulevard would dead end right here at Selinsky. And we're not going to go any further.